Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Fine words, but I'm sure you understand that all taxi drivers have a legal requirement to pick up a fare. They're not allowed to refuse a fare if a passenger gets into the cab. And there's a lot of schemes which are coming in under your administration which are restricting taxi drivers' access to certain roads, which means that they simply can't do their job. As it's a legal requirement, don't you think this needs a rethink?
Chair, I mean, I'm unclear. So the Assembly referred to, under my administration, I've brought in schemes that are stopping taxis using roads.
Such as Tooley Street, and then also there's the Tottenham Court Road restricting access to taxi drivers along there, which is being funded by TfL.
Let's deal with both of those. So Tooley Street was still up to consultation. We've not responded yet, so it's a premature assertion to be made by the Assembly member. Tottenham Court Road is a Camden-run scheme. Camden Council.
It's being funded by TfL.
We fund a number of schemes, but we believe in autonomy. You either believe in councils as having autonomy or you don't. And so it's a council scheme. And
it's something that you are, in favour of.
Well, what I've said in my answer is the council and others who have these schemes must make sure they carry out equality impact assessments, and that includes the impact on those who are disabled. In the Tottenham Court Road scheme, what the council's undertaken, as I understand it, is to make sure the roads that go across Tottenham Court Road are all accessible for the taxis, so those people who are disabled will still have access as near as they can from the taxis and the roads that go across the Tottenham Court Road.
I'm sure you know that there are 57,000 taxi card holders in London. They're given out by the boroughs, and people who have taxi cards are often wheelchair bound or have other disabilities, like they may be blind, for example. Taxis are a vital support for these people. They need taxis to get around. For those people, by restricting access to certain roads in London, it's going to make life very, very much more difficult for taxi card holders. Now, you mentioned doing an equality impact assessment, but some of the schemes, if they come in, which are going to restrict taxis' access to roads, are going to hurt these people. So don't you need to have a rethink of restricting taxi access to certain roads?
Well, I think we just agreed, Chair, that I'm not restricting access for taxis to any roads. We're consulting Tooley Street. We'll be responding shortly. What we are doing is preparing guidance for boroughs to ensure a consistent approach to such schemes across London. That include the guidance, information on taxis and accessibility as well.
Will you be bringing in any more schemes like Tooley Street, or putting out any more schemes for consultation where taxis are going to have their access restricted, or is this the last one?
I'm not sure. I can't foretell what happens in the future in relation to...
Well, you have a transport strategy, so that deals with what you want to do in the future, and so you must have some kind of clue as to what you want to do in terms of allowing taxis to either continue to use the roads that they're allowed to use already, or possibly restricting them in the future.
I'm quite clear. I think public transport is very important for those Londoners who need access to a wheelchair-accessible taxi.
So can you say that all the roads that taxis are allowed to travel on now will not be restricted in the future? There will be no more plans to restrict taxi access to roads in the future while you're the mayor. Can you say that?
No, you can't set in stone a policy for our city going forward with a growing population and with transport changing, with technological advances and the rest of it. I think that would be a very unwise thing to do.
Mr. Mayor, I mean, you must realise that the taxi trade is really under an existential threat at the moment. I mean, when you came into office, there were 23,000 taxi drivers. The numbers now, as I understand, are down to below 20,000, and the numbers of people taking the knowledge of London to become taxi drivers is fallen through the floor. One figure I have is now down to about 200 in a year. I mean, there needs to be something done to boost the taxi trade, to ensure that it continues, to ensure that the numbers of taxi drivers are kept to the same level. Why do you think that there's been such a drop in the number of taxi drivers and a drop in the number of people who are doing the knowledge of London under your administration?
Well, the number of taxi drivers has been going up for some time. The numbers of those doing knowledge have been going down for some time. The previous two mayors were also not loved by the black taxi trade. But if you see the plans we've brought into place since I became mayor, the action plan, there are more bus lanes now have accessibility to taxis than before. I think 95% of bus lanes under the TfL road network are accessible to taxis. 93% of all bus lanes on the general road network are accessible to taxis. We've made sure there are more taxi cab ranks since I became mayor. We've improved the awareness of the knowledge and improving its
Mr. Mayor,
status.
I'm going to have to stop you because I'm nearly out
There's
of
a
time.
big list of
I
things
do-
I've done to help
We've gone
taxis,
over this ground
which you've
before,
interrupted.
and you have done some things, but you know it's also a little disappointing that you couldn't say that there will be no further restrictions on taxi access. So you know we'll have to communicate further about that. Thank you, Jack.